Welcome to the Western Bowl podcast series, with talks on traditional spiritual teaching and its application in the world today. The intention of the series is to offer something useful for those who are drawn to study themselves and engage practice on the spiritual path. New talks are posted twice each month. The content of the talks is for informational purposes only, and not to provide any kind of counseling, medical, or professional advice. This podcast is titled, All Things Lovely Exist. The talk was given by Naomi Worob on November 23, 2024 via Zoom. Naomi has practiced living with kindness, generosity, and compassion on Triveni Ashram in the high desert of Arizona. She is engaged in dance and theater performances with Nervous Theater, Collective Movement, and Jacob's Pillow. She speaks about principles of pleasure activism based on a book by Adrienne Marie Brown, and points out that we become what we practice, that what we pay attention to grows, and that we can choose to focus on what is beautiful, intriguing, and awe-inspiring, and move toward that. Naomi notes that this doesn't mean that everything is easy, and she talks about how resilience is rooted in being part of communities that offer the space to grieve and experience the whole spectrum of emotions. She discusses the unique circumstance she has had in living with elders on an ashram, and engages in dialogue with those in attendance about the value of supportive relationships in working with ourselves on a spiritual path. If there is benefit in this talk for you, please consider sharing the link to it or writing a review on social media or on one of the podcast platforms. Naomi Worob.
Okay, welcome everybody. So tonight, our topic of conversation is All Things Lovely Exist. And this was a title of a dance piece that me and a good friend created back in 2019. And what the piece was then was this feeling between us that we had this whole expansive, creative world of possibility between us and between every friendship, between every relationship. We're building a house together. We're building our own creative play space. And we get to do whatever the heck we want to do in that relationship together. So for us, we were asking questions about how we can show up to our relationship with more kindness and creativity and vulnerability and trust. So that's kind of the context for where the name of this piece came. And the bio piece feels relevant because for me, there's so many ways that the way we identify ourselves or are identified in the world puts us into boxes of what we do rather than who we are. And for me, this idea that great beauty exists in the world is really centered on seeing the beauty that is innate and natural in each one of us, in our shared landscapes, and all of that good stuff. So there's some background, some context, but we're going to take a moment just to arrive together and orient to our shared space together. So wherever you are, I invite you to just be comfortable, to adjust your body if you need to settle in any way that feels sweet to you right now. We're going to take a few minutes to just connect to our breath. You can close your eyes, and right away we can just notice that we're all here together. We're alive, and this is precious. You can bring your attention to any sounds in your environment, noticing the uniqueness about where you are. You can notice your breath with each inhale. You can see if there's any space, any tension in your body that wants to relax. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes or refocus your gaze. Just begin to look around your space. Notice where you are. And you can take your hands and you can begin to move your hands around your space as if your hands were almost your eyes or your guides for being here in this space. You can touch different textures, brush your skin, your clothes. And as you're doing this, just notice where you want to linger, what movements feel good, what textures feel good. Okay, let's all just take a big deep breath together, stretch our bodies. We'll come back together. So I studied dance in college, and it was a little bit unexpected that I ended up studying dance. I hadn't done much dance growing up. I had taken a few dance classes, but when I got to college, I just had this feeling when I was at registration, like this jolt of excitement when I realized that I could sign up for a dance class. And so I signed up for a dance class, and it was wonderful. But my first dance class was beginning ballet class. And so it was a beautiful invitation to move with absolutely no opportunity for continuing because I was 18 years old and I was already too old to do anything in the ballet world. So it's all good. Great experience. Loved that dance class and then let it go. And then I ended up transferring schools. I went to a small liberal arts school in the Midwest in Iowa and didn't really think much of dance for a little bit, but then I had a friend who was in a dance ensemble and I was so delighted by her performances. And I felt like, oh man, I just want to dance. Is that even possible? They said I was too old, but I inquired some more and I was welcome in the dance group in college. The professor there, she held a space for dance where it was truly open to everybody. And she held a context for dance that made it accessible for everybody. So dance was for everybody. The definition that she gave for dance was movement aware of itself, practiced with intent. So anytime we're moving, then we can bring awareness to our movement, then we are dancing. And so with that definition, it gives us each the opportunity to rest in this gift that we've been given in our human bodies to dance. It's not anything fancy. It doesn't have to be a specific form, but just simply knowing that we can move our bodies in any way that we want to. And that is dance. That's in our pocket. It's in our toolbox. So I just want to keep that there for us. I'm not going to make you dance, don't worry. But with that, as we're just setting the context for our time together, I want to say that you're welcome to be comfortable and to move your bodies at any time because we can do this and we should exercise this right. So part of All Things Lovely Exist is having wide eyes on what is beautiful, what feels intriguing and awe-inspiring and wondering in the world, and then noticing that I can move towards that and noticing when that's inside me as well. So with that, I have a song for us because we're not only dancers just by matter of fact of our being, but we're also able to sing and able to produce sound together. So this song is a welcome song. You're invited to sing it. You'll be on mute because Zoom is a weird world where we can't necessarily sing together. And so you can sing if you want to sing. If you don't want to sing, that's all good. If you need to tell somebody in your space that you're about to sing, it's good. But this is a welcome song. And the words are for all of us. And so Rita and I are going to sing it together to you, but also you can take the words inside of yourself and then offer it to the space in general. This is a call and response song. And you'll know the words after we sing it just once. So here we go. Wild heart, welcome in.
Wild heart, welcome in.
We will sing our way to wholeness. We'll do it again. Wild heart,
wild heart,
welcome in.
welcome in.
Wild heart,
Wild heart,
welcome in.
welcome in.
Wild heart,
Wild heart,
welcome in.
welcome in.
We will sing our way to wholeness. Okay, that's good for now. You read that one? Good. Okay. This idea that all things lovely exist. I'm curious what that means to you right now.
In this very challenging time of unknowing, there are still beautiful things. The same beauty, the same kindness, the same creativity, all of that still exists. And that's very comforting.
I think that there are so many different ways to look at everything, whether it's what's going on in the world, in our country, in our own lives, and to be able to always remember beauty and that there is so much gorgeousness and loveliness can be in nature. You can find it in yourself. And it can be something really small, or someone that you're having a conversation with will say something and you find something lovely in what they're saying. So I feel like that's always available to us, even in the darkest times.
Today was my last day working on a farm where I work in Boston, and it felt like a particularly beautiful and lovely day. So it feels like a timely message to share today.
The beauty to see in things which are maybe on the first appearance not so lovely and easy to love. And I had a day today of making a step towards those things which are a little bit more complicated to love, or where it's harder to see the beauty. It's not, oh, there's a baby or a puppy or a butterfly. To see the beauty even in darkness. Yeah. Not to judge the darkness. This is dark and this is light, especially where I grew up in Germany, like the dark times, because days are so short where I grew up. So there is a lot of darkness in this time, but also the time where you bake a lot, where you lit the candles, where you sit together and sleep more. So there is something beautiful and there is something bright in the darkness.
I'll just share that I had the good fortune to see the beauty in other people's reactions today. Some friends and even people who I interacted with in a casual way. There was a beautiful connection, there was a smile, there was a presence. And for me, that's very beautiful, very enlivening.
Thank you for sharing these thoughts. I'm going to continue on and I hope echo and share my own perspectives on many of the things that you just said as well. So kind of gave some context for where this title came and what was happening at that moment. For me, since then, there was just something juicy about what these words were. And so they have stuck around me and just continued to buzz around and be in my life. Yeah. 2 years ago, I was in Bozeman, Montana, and I was working as a preschool teacher there. And I decided to make this brave leap into a year of a lot of unstructured time and travel. And it felt so scary. And it felt like it was going against so many social and cultural norms that I had been given about how I should be responsible with my time and resources and what I should be moving towards. But I feel like with this idea of all things lovely exist, there's this great expansive world, and I can't stay tight in a structure when I know inside of myself that there's something calling that I want to move towards. So it was kind of with that energy that I stepped out and began traveling, going to different places. And really the question that I had at that point was, how have people learned to live well, knowing that within my own culture and context and community that I grew up in, there was great wisdom. And then in this wide world, all of these different cultures, all these different religions, these traditions, all these different places had these ways of navigating through life well. And I wanted to be able to move towards them and learn more about that. So that was part of it. And in that, for me, it's moving towards joy and connection. And what I've realized as I've done this is that bravery, vulnerability, joy, these things, they snowball. When I follow the fun, when I lean into what feels good, then it lands me at a next place that feels curious. There's been an author who has been kind of a companion with me in this journey, and her name is Adrienne Murray Brown. She's an activist and facilitator, a doula, and an artist. And she wrote a book that's called Pleasure Activism. And the subtitle is The Politics of Feeling Good. And what she offers in this book is that we can do what feels good, and that will create positive change in our world. We can lean into what's pleasurable. We can notice what feels good in ourselves, and we can also understand more of what that is within our relationships, within our communities, as we are receptive to feedback and understanding others' experiences. And all of that accumulation is a way that we can participate in activism. And that was super inspiring to me. So Adrienne Murray Brown, in this book, Pleasure Activism, she gives some different pillars that we can think about within this practice. She offers that these things are a different part of pleasure activism. We become what we practice. What you pay attention to grows. Your no makes way for your yes, and yes is the way. Make justice and liberation feel good. When I am happy, it is good for the world. And moderation is key. So I want to spend some time in each of those different containers. And you all feel free, if you have something to say, if you have a question, if you have something that you want to contribute at any moment, feel free to raise your hand, jump in. It's all good. Okay, we become what we practice. For me, this offers the question of what is my practice and what is it that I'm practicing? And something that I've come to understand is that practice is alive in every moment. There's specific times for me. I have a meditation practice, and so that's a moment, when a container of time when I'm trying to strengthen and deepen something, a capacity within myself. But then also every moment is a moment to practice, and it's an opportunity to be receptive to what it is we are wanting to move towards. So for me, elements that have been important in my practice have been compassion for myself, compassion for my experience, for my healing, for my growth, for who I am. And it's been compassion for others, working to have wide eyes to let in who another person might be, and also to sit quietly with an open heart and open listening ears so that I can hear from the other person who they are, and I can learn to see them and to love them more. I have a practice to be connected with the earth and with all living beings, knowing that I am interdependent. I am one piece, a small piece here on this earth, and my body will be here for a period of time, and then I will be recycled. I'll be beautifully composted into the world. And with that, there's an acknowledgement of the pain and the suffering that our world, our earth, is enduring, and having an open heart for that resource, that alive being. And then I also have a practice of learning more how to access joy in my body. For me, as a human being, I've been given the innate ability to dance, to move. I've been given a voice and I can sing. And I don't have to sing well. Just in my being, it's natural for me to play when I allow it. And so these are all things that I feel like it's important to practice. We become what we practice. That's what Adrienne Marie Brown says is a part of pleasure activism. The next thing is what you pay attention to grows. So for me, what my meditation practice has given me is a big space to look at where my attention goes, what my patterns of thoughts are, and to realize that I have the power to shape those thoughts, focus my attention. A useful exercise for me in this has been just labeling thoughts and letting them go, noticing I'm carried away in imagination. I'm planning another theater performance right now. I am planning my future. I am dwelling on a past interaction and just noticing them and then letting them go. And then focusing my attention back on the present moment and realizing that that's really where I want to be, allowing my present moment experience, my ability to lean into what feels good there, what is curious, what is awe-inspiring, what feels important, and let that accumulate to the next thing. Tasha, who is with us tonight, earlier in the year, we were talking about how as creative people, we both have active imaginations, and I can become so tired with very beautiful thoughts of all of the things that I could do, all the things that I could create. And at some point, it felt like this is a good thing. This is me seeing all these beautiful things that exist. But I noticed that the effect of that was really just me feeling pretty wiped in my body. So she had this great reframe on a kind of a Buddhist mantra. She said, my mind is of the nature to have ideas, to imagine, and my body is of the material world, and I live here in the material world. So in this idea, all things lovely exist. For me, it's essential that it is a practice here in the real world, not just in my mind and imagination, but each moment by moment. What is it? Where is joy? Where is pleasure? Where do I see light? Where do I see the opportunity for healing? And that all things lovely exist. It doesn't mean that everything is easy and that it's just joy and pleasure and effortlessness. We know that suffering is a part of our lives, that we each carry our own unique trauma, that we have been born into systems that are unjust and that affect our wellness and our ability to relate to each other. And that there is great joy when we can do the hard, difficult work of leaning into what is broken, what needs healing, and holding that with tender care in our lives, and then moving through that to the beauty that is inevitably on the other side. The next thing is your no makes the way for your yes, and yes is the way. And there's a beautiful exercise that Davy gave to me, and Davy's here right now. It was a partner exercise where one partner would simply list yes and no questions. And the invitation was to just, as quickly as possible, feel in your body where my yes and where my no was. And that was such a beautiful exercise for me because it was so simple and it was so immediate for me. If somebody said, do you want to eat spaghetti right now? No. Do I want to go to the movies? No. Do I want to take a walk? Yes. And on and on and on and on and on. So my no makes way for my yes. I have to know my no and my yes first before I have the opportunity to access the space and the ease that's in my yes. And that can be difficult work. We know that in close relationships or in moments when we feel pressure in any direction, it can be hard to hold true, to listen inside, to know what our no's and our yeses are. But I found that the more that I can honor myself, honor what my yes and honor what my no is, and communicate it with kindness, then the more I can move with strength and power, conviction, love, and excitement towards the yes that is essential for growing in my being and for accessing the beauty that I want to be participating in. The next thing is make justice and liberation feel good. And the question that I sat with is, what is justice and liberation? And for me, justice and liberation is about healing. It's about safety. It's about love and real relationships, knowing how to take care of each other and being participants in each other's lives on a wide level. It goes back to the necessity of moving through conflict, moving through heartbreak, healing our wounds, and learning how to be in better relationship with each other. We know that in our world, there's immense inequality, injustice, and we have been born into bodies with varying levels of privilege and born into countries with their own structures and histories that we are now working with in our lives. And so, with all that, all the chunkiness, all the complexity that is just a part of our lives as it is, an essential part of justice and liberation for me is being able to listen to other people and understand their experience and understand what we've been born into, how that affects our ability to relate to each other. And from that place of deep listening, understanding each other's experience, then being able to build a movement towards more just systems, cultures, communities, relationships. The next one is, when I am happy, it is good for the world. This goes back to what I was saying about my bio. Again, for me, I notice that my wellness and my joy impact my relationships. They impact the space that I'm in. And there's so much value in that. And I think we're often given a script that tells us that the good that we do in the world is based on the jobs that we have. And we're doing more good if we have more impressive jobs that people can really just instantly identify the good, positive work that we're doing. But I do believe, and it's my experience, that the wellness of our being and our capacity for love and compassion and joy is the most impactful, way beyond whatever job I have ever had. If I can do dishes joyfully, if I can clean joyfully, if I can be in a group joyfully, then there's a lot to be gained from that. And the last one is moderation is key. There's a few different things there that are sparked for me. And there was a quote about idealism. There's beware of idealism. For me, this is a part of moderation is key, and also a part of this whole practice of moving towards what is lovely, what is beautiful. Being a part of pleasure activism is grounding it in our body, grounding it in the present moment, and knowing that we can't hold extreme joy at all moments. We can't be ecstatic always. It's really actually painful if we have to maintain that sort of energy. And so moderation is key. We work with how we're doing in any moment and accept what it is. We're open to joy when it comes. We're curious. We follow what feels good. And then also, we're not tied to needing to hold on to those high states of intense positivity. So I feel like I just said a lot. It's my first time giving a talk. It feels like I'm in a dark void right now. It's all good. So I'm going to open it up for some feedback and just some participation.
You have such a positive attitude. That actually is not so common, even on the spiritual path, it seems to me. And yet you have experienced suffering. How have you developed resilience and ways to work with suffering and times that inevitably come when we're down? It seems to me like having a positive attitude is a practice for you.
Yeah. Some of the moments that come to mind for me are when my older brother was incarcerated. I had a few close family members who passed away, and that was an intimate experience of death and grief. And those were all moments for me that required journeying through quite a bit of suffering and moments that revealed to me what my resiliency is. I do think that there's a few things there. One, I feel like I have to honor the community of people that were around me in all of those moments and honor the fact that I have people in my life that have exemplified how to be honest about what our experience is at any moment without any shame, with love and acceptance, and how to hold each other in those moments. So I feel like a huge part of my resiliency has been rooted in being a part of communities that know how to accept life and offer me space to grieve and question and to express anger and the whole spectrum of emotions. I also think that it's been my experience that there's great beauty and love at the depth of my sorrow. And that makes it just 100% worth it to do the hard work of feeling the losses that I have, feeling the pain that I feel for the violence and cruelty that impacts people I love and exists in the world and impacts me. Yeah, it feels just worth it. In my experience, it is so worth it to feel. Because when I feel and when I feel deeply, then I feel so connected. I feel so held. And there's just a deep well, a deep source of energy.
Yeah, it seems like many of the problems in the world might be attributed to not being able to feel or not being willing to feel, to cover it over. And then it just comes out in aggressive, mean ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that this invitation that I was given by my dance professor, this acknowledgement that anybody can move, that we can all move, and that we can move in any way, this improvisational movement became a huge part of my practice at that point. And I have found being able to move with my experiences to find strength to feel. And so, what that looks like at a practical level is when I was grieving the death of my dad, then I was making space for myself in a quiet room to just move, to hold shapes in my body of the sorrow that I was feeling, to remember in my body what it felt like to be held by him, to let all of that cellular information just be alive and with me, and then see where it took me. And for me, in being able to do processes like that, then it was a full and beautiful and quick reminder of the impermanence of emotions and the dynamic ability to have things move through us.
Gosh, it seems like the body is part of that whole possibility of having feelings move through us. If the body can move, things probably don't stay stuck.
Yeah, that is how I feel 100%.
Yeah.
Make your body move. Yeah, allowing our bodies to move. There's a meditation teacher, Stefan. He's a meditation and breathwork teacher in Germany. And he framed meditation practice in such a soft way for me, different than an idea that in seated meditation, an idea that I had had before, that there's something important about me staying in a more rigid posture of meditation. He offered the spaciousness around noticing that within our bodies, there's always an impulse to move. And meditation can be a practice where we are present with what those impulses are. That went two ways. One is that, yes, we can be in a relatively still posture of meditation, and we can notice within us there's always movement happening. And maybe that translates to subtle body movements, and that's all good. It's part of meditation. But then also, if I'm holding a posture of meditation and I'm feeling a large impulse to move, I can say yes to that, because from what we're sharing now, it just feels absolutely essential that we allow our bodies to move. That's been essential to me.
Well, I was thinking about your topic of all things lovely and thinking how all things lovely could be to surrender, to not resist, and to allow. So you were talking about when you let yourself feel sorrow or grief, that it takes you to a place of beauty. It's completely worth it. And I was thinking about this poem by the poet David White. He was talking about grief. He was writing about it. And he said, if we let ourselves go to the bottom of the well where we can't breathe and we stay there, then at some point, we may not know what that point is, but at some point, we breathe again and new life emerges, arises for us. And that seems to be what you're saying, is that when we don't resist that, when we want to cultivate joy in our lives and well-being and healing and kindness and generosity and compassion, that when we get to those places where we are at the bottom of the well and we can't breathe, that if we can just stay there in that place, something will be reborn, something will awaken and come to life.
I was thinking that the reaction of one who would hear this without the context that you're laying for us is Pollyanna, flighty, positive thinker, new age, everything's beautiful, denying reality, unicorns and rainbows and so on. And what you're doing is actually taking a very radical stand, because so much of our religious heritage has indoctrinated us with, if it doesn't hurt, it doesn't have any value. That pleasure is actually a sin. My teacher said, seek beauty, avoid suffering. And he was not talking about the fact that there is suffering in the world, but that we create so much unnecessary suffering in the way in which we look at the world and hold creation. So thanks for your radical stand.
It isn't about just being interested in what is materially beautiful or on the surface attractive, but it is about orienting towards life with wide eyes and knowing that life will bring us suffering, life will bring us work. And it is my hope for myself and for others that we can participate in the conflict and in all that is challenging about life with our full presence, relax and surrender and enjoy when we can.
As you've been talking, I can't help thinking of Viktor Frankl, the great writer who was in a concentration camp in the Second World War. And his book, Man's Search for Meaning, which was probably the most profound book I've read in my lifetime, I would say. And Viktor Frankl was no Pollyanna. He suffered greatly. And what he came away with was the last freedom we have is to choose how we face life, to choose joy, to choose connection, to choose to find what's lovely, to find what's pleasurable in the darkest and most terrible of times that go on and on and on and on. And sometimes I have my own judgments of following what feels good. I have too much privilege to be able to do that. I should suffer more. But I think of Viktor Frankl and his ability to find joy and his ability to find love and connection and profound beauty is deeply inspiring.
Reminds me of Garshin Rinpoche as well. I was watching a documentary of him recently, and he is somebody who was in prison for 20 years in Tibet and just held steadfast to that belief as well, and practiced and practiced and practiced through incredibly difficult and enduring circumstances.
Yeah, because both of these are examples of all things lovely exist if we put our attention on them. In these situations, we can absolutely find that nothing lovely exists, nothing, if that's where we put our attention. And I just think those are two beautiful examples of it really is coming back to one of your original points about where we place our attention.
And for me, we are all living in this moment together, and we know the violence and the fear and the war and all the suffering that is alive and being fueled in our world right now. And it seems necessary in the landscape of all of that to be choosing to be connected, open, joyful, and powerful with each other.
I think that there's a great temptation to be resigned, to just throw up our hands, to feel hopeless, to just be depressed. And it's not like there's not a place for that. I think there's a place for everything that we feel. But to actually take a stand and to say, yes, I might have moments like that, but I choose to stand in my body and to stand as a warrior and to stand for all things lovely is just such an amazing antidote to what so many people in the world are going through in a state of deep resignation and despair. And it doesn't mean that we don't have days, we don't feel like that, but that's not how we show up all the time. And the world needs our kindness, and the world needs us to show up in exactly the way that you're talking about.
We don't do this alone, which I think I've said at some moments, but maybe not so clearly. We do this in relationship with other people so that we can hold spaces of healing and hold each other in strength and with openness to being witness to and participating in the grief that's a part of moving towards love with all that is going around. We can't do that alone. That's a process that we need each other for.
Being a yes and being a no is like such a interesting practice for me in times when I do not have any kind of energy to spend. I felt this the last month. If I'm saying yes to something, what my body's first response was a no, but I was a nice girl or whatever, then the consequences were so big, my own suffering, yeah. because I put something or somebody before or wanted to please, whatever the reason is. And this is so important to be with a full heart, a no and a yes. It's so funny because when you are from the deepest of your being saying no in a kind way, then on the other side, there is an acceptance. Yeah, because this person is feeling that is a no from the being and not a no because I have something against them or whatever, yeah, on a psychological level. When I am clear about what I want, where I want to focus, what goes over my limits, it's really an interesting journey for me to see, okay, what do I need now to live a life in kindness, generosity, and compassion? Where do I need a yes and a no? And where's my focus on and where is my attention going?
Yeah, because we need our full bodies, we need our wellness. I feel like there's been a script that we need to work hard and we can't stop. You got to keep on going and you have to say yes. And that is how we accomplish the work that we need to do in our lives. But really, we need our bodies, we need our wellness, we need to be nourished and then move from that place. And it's hard work. It's another reason why this isn't any floaty, frivolous, like Pollyanna business. This is deep, hard work to be able to know what our yes and no is and to be able to honor that and communicate that.
I want to read a poem from Mary Oliver.
Okay, do it.
And this poem is called Sometimes. It has 4 lines. It goes like this. Sometimes. Instructions for living a life. Pay attention. Be astonished. Tell about it.
Thank you.
You mentioned in your bio that you lived on an ashram and you've had interactions with longtime practitioners who are older. And there's just this tendency to become more stodgy and set in one's ways for a lot of people as they get older. And you've seen a situation in which practitioners of many years have been involved in. Is there something that you think would be useful for older practitioners to consider on the path? And also, is there anything in particular that you have gotten from elders that you've interacted with? Because your situation has been kind of unique.
Yeah. So I live at Triveni Ashram, and it's a desert sanctuary, a place where people from all sorts of different spiritual backgrounds come to practice. And then there's also a group of people who live there full time. And so I'm one of about 18 people that live there, and I am the youngest by somewhere between 30 to 40 years. I think that's true. And I wouldn't live here if I didn't feel joy and vitality and aliveness in the community of people that I get to live with. I live with 2 women who are in their 70s, and I feel like they're just great fun. They're fabulous people, and I feel inspired by them, and I feel their youthfulness, and I feel their vitality, and I feel their practice that I think allows them actually to be adaptable and changing. And so I notice, yes, there are moments when people are in their patterns, and I notice that for young people as well. But I have witnessed more so that people are taking in feedback and actually changing in little and not so little ways. And that feels very inspiring to me. Yeah, it's a great gift, I think, for me to get to be in the company of people who are older than me and who are practicing, and talk quite a bit about eldership, what it means to be an elder. And in that conversation, then we realized that an essential part of being an elder is also having a younger there. And so I feel like I've gotten to have great relationships with people who have journeyed through life in such whole and interesting ways. And in both directions, I've gotten to receive their wisdom as an elder and also activate that as a younger.
You've offered them dancing sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes we dance. Yeah, I think that is an important context, that I am living in a circumstance that some might see as odd and I find quite beautiful. And I think that I'm able to enjoy, or I'm just able to be here because I have worked with this openness to feeling what feels right and saying yes to it.
Getting back to this whole idea of yes and no,
Mm-hmm.
no makes a way for the yes. I'm wondering if there are times when you feel like you say yes and what you really want to say is no. Do you ever struggle with that, and how do you work with that? Is that something that you have to work with?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think I grew up learning a lot of pleasing, doing things for other people, and receiving a lot of positive feedback for that. And so it was like, hey, this is a good way of being. Like, I get good grades, I get A's, and then I'm celebrated. This is good. I like do things for other people. That it's good, it's good, it's good. And there was an exercise in which we were working with different dimensions of ourselves, different parts of ourselves, different distorted versions of ourselves. And one of the aspects that we were given to interrogate for ourselves was the pleaser. That was one moment for me where I was able to recognize how far I can step outside of my energy and my capacity to please somebody, and how much that diminishes my wellness and my strength and my power. So it's been a whole journey for me. Just the other day, there was a big celebration at the ashram where I live. And so there was lots of work to be done. And then the celebration ended, and I was like, okay, rest mode. And so I was in rest mode, and I was watching my housemate do just load after load of laundry. And I was like, oh, is this okay? Do I need to be doing laundry as well? But I had also said, oh, I'm resting, and I'm going to be in silence for the day. So I was feeling these kind of uncomfortable feelings, but I was also holding my space and knowing that my rest and my silence was good for me. But the next day I checked in, and I just said, I just wanted to ask whether you felt resentful when you were doing that work, or if you felt it was a burden for you. And she was like, no, not at all. She said, I don't do work out of resentment or something like that. And so one way that I have been growing in reining in my pleasing tendencies and growing in my ability to say yes and no is finding more comfort with check-ins like that. But it's still work, and still comes with many moments of feeling like, no, do they like me? Am I okay, Davy?
Yeah, I just want to make a distinction because you were referring back to this work on what we call the pleaser. And it's such a different thing to be pleasing essentially as a strategy. It's a self-abandonment, right? And that is where resentment comes from. After all I've done for you, I've done all this laundry. And because we have an agenda, right, of getting love, essentially. I mean, it comes down to that, but it's so different than actual generosity. Mm-hmm. True, deep, loving generosity, which isn't overzealous and self-abandoning. And there's so much beauty in that deep and true generosity. It has a very different existence than pleasing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that's a good term, self-abandonment, because sometimes I know for myself, when I abandon myself, I don't even know I'm doing it. Just being able to recognize within myself that I'm abandoning myself right now. I really just want to say no. I want to do something else or whatever it is, whatever the circumstances. I think recognizing that tendency in the ways that we abandon ourselves, for me, I have found to be really, really helpful, because then I can make the distinction between the tendency to please, to get love, and with real generosity, that I don't feel like I've abandoned myself. I feel like it fills me up. It has the opposite effect.
Yeah, and I feel like saying a true yes and no felt very scary in moments when I didn't have a strong anchor and core of self-compassion. It's been my experience that things usually don't go incredibly poorly, and I happen to be in the company of people that receive yeses and no well. But in my fear brain, as I'm preparing to say no, then I can feel like, well, the worst thing that could happen is I'm completely rejected, whatever. But even in that fear brain, if I have that thought, but I have a steadiness of self-compassion, then it's okay, I can do it.
It's a noble path to balance that with responsibility.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking of this very funny term. I've never been to Burning Man, but there's this term at Burning Man called "don't be a sparkle pony."
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's a great term, right? And I think about this, is the sparkle pony is the one who avoids the responsibility and goes the way of fun, or goes the way of not being the one who washes the dishes, not being the one who shows up when there's work to be done. They'd rather go and sparkle somewhere else. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but how do you balance that? How do you balance that with knowing that there's also responsibilities to fulfill?
Two things come up for me. One is integrity. Integrity is something that's really important to me, and building trust in my relationships and showing up fully. I stick with my commitments because I feel like that's a very important thing in my relationships and in my community, with the exceptions of moments when, of course, something needs to shift or adjust.
It's a paradox, isn't it? How do you stay true to yourself and keep your commitments? And sometimes these things are at odds, but facing that with honesty and truth and integrity, you can face that paradox honestly, I think.
Yeah, and I feel like in that there is work that I have to do, there's work that we have to do, there's obligations. And so in those moments, then I feel like it goes back to the question of surrender, being with what is, and asking myself in moments like, how can I take care of myself as I'm doing a task that feels difficult or enduring? Can I keep on breathing? Can I adjust my body in a way that feels more nourishing or comforting? Can I find joy with the people that I'm working with? Things like that.
Beautiful.
For me, another aspect of that is if I'm in communication and in relationship with the people who are affected, I made a commitment to something, but in the moment I feel I'm a no to that or I can't do that. If I'm really honest about that and open my mouth and tell a person where I am and have the hard conversations, the honest conversation with each other, relationships are such a big piece of work. It takes time and energy to stay in a relationship. But for me, it's the only way to survive.
So it's time to end, but I want to ask you, is there an aspect of spiritual teaching that you're particularly resonant with? Or is there a principle that is meaningful to you?
Yeah, just kindness, compassion, generosity, love. These are the things that I'm moving towards. There's a wide world. So many things are possible. We as humans, we can build prisons. We can also build temples. And for me, the responsibility and the acknowledgement that I have the choice in my life to choose to move towards love, compassion, generosity, and kindness.
Great. And do you feel that young people these days have a need for the path?
Yeah, I feel like humans, we're all spiritual bugs, whether we know it or whether we don't. We're all moving through the world with our spirits. And I think people are finding spiritual paths. And I think that will always be with us.